We're now going to do an example where we use some of the functions and methods that we've been talking about, but this one's going to be a little bit larger in terms of the size of the project. What we're going to do is create a form that calculates the loan. So we're going to have some text boxes where the user can enter in the values. We're going to have several buttons. So like I said, this will be a much larger project, but I think it's going to be very worthwhile. So we're in Visual Studio, and we'll go ahead and create a new project for this. So we'll click on New Project, and then we'll let this load, and then we'll go with Windows Forms Application, and then we're going to call this Loan Payment Application. So the idea with this is if we're taking out a loan, and we know the principal, the annual rate, and how many years it's going to take to pay back the loan, we can figure out how much we would have to pay each month in order to pay off this loan. So we have our form here, so we need to add several things to make this work. So we're going to add some labels first. So we'll go to our toolbox, and we'll go under all Windows Forms, and we're going to add some labels. So we'll do 3 of them. Actually, I lied, we need 4. We need 4 labels. Alright, we're going to move them down here. Alright, so we'll move down a little bit more. So with the labels, we're not so worried about the names of the labels, but we do need to change the text. So this first one is the label for the principal amount, so we're going to call it principal. And then we're also going to increase the size. So we'll go under font, and then we will, if this pops up, change the font. Let's make a 12-point font. That's easier to read. Okay. So now with label 2, we'll go ahead and change the font since we can. And then we'll change the name down here, or the text I should say. And this is where the annual interest rate is going to be. So we'll say annual rate. And then the third one, we're going to have this be the label for the term in years. And then we need to change the font. So we'll move up here. And we're going to set this to 12. And then finally, our fourth label will increase its font size. And then this is where we'll have a label for a button to actually do the calculation. So we're going to say monthly payment is. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's try to clean up some of the spacing a little bit. Okay. That looks pretty good. All right, I'll take that. We now need to add some text boxes. So let's go into our toolbox and add some text boxes. So let's see your text box. We need 3 text boxes. So here's the third one. And then let's move this one right here. And then move the last one right here. That looks pretty good. All right, now we do need to give some names for these. So we will call, we're going to call this TB principal. Just making sure I spell it right. Yep. Okay, then this one will be, we'll call it TB rate. And then we'll call this one TB years. Okay, so there's our, that takes care of the text boxes. We now need to add some buttons. We're going to have 3 different buttons, and I'll explain why in just a bit. But let's go ahead and create 3 buttons. Okay, I'm going to put button 3 right about here. Button 2 we'll put right here. Then I'll put button 1 here. And we're going to change some things with the buttons as well. Button 1 is going to handle our calculation. So we're going to call this BT calc. Okay. And then we're going to change the text. Let's see here. We're going to change that to calculate. And then we'll also increase its font. So let's increase that to 12. Okay, so now we need to increase the size of our button to accommodate. Let's do, yeah, that's pretty good. All right, this one, we're going to add a button that allows us to clear the contents of our text boxes. So we'll go ahead and make that button too. So while we're here, I'll go ahead and increase the font size. And then we'll go down to text, and we're going to say clear all. And then I'm going to go down to the name, and I'm going to change it to BT clear. Alright, so we need to increase the button size here. So let's do, that's too big. Let's try this. That looks pretty good. Alright, and then button 3 is going to be our exit button. So that will allow us to close the form here. So we're going to call it BT exit. And then we're going to go up here and change the text to exit. And then we'll go ahead and change the font. So we'll make that 12-point font. Okay. So we need to adjust this a little bit to make it large enough. Okay, that looks pretty good. Yeah, that's close enough. The clear all button might be a little bit smaller, but that's not a major issue. I guess I can make it a little bit. Yeah, that works. All right, I'll take it. Okay, so here is our form. So now we need to do some stuff with it. So we gotta do some operations with all of these buttons. Let's do the clear all and exit ones first. Those are going to be pretty easy to do. So I'll double click on exit. And then we get our event for clicking on that. And we're just going to do me.close. We're not going to worry about any confirmation for this one. We're just going to make this as simple as possible, where we just exit the form. The clear all, we'll double click that one, and that creates our sub procedure. And what we're going to do here is clear the contents of all of our text boxes. So in here we need to do TB principal. Notice it already gives us our text box here, so we'll go ahead and click on that. Dot clear, and then TB, and then rate. I can actually hit the tab button to move on to the next part, so I don't have to click on it. I can just select and hit tab. That's my personal preference. Dot clear, and then TB years. Dot clear. All right, this looks good so far. And then we need to do something with our calculate. This is where the bulk of our work is going to be in here, because we need to parse the strings that were entered in the text boxes. We then need to compute the monthly payment, and then we need to display it. So we're going to need a couple of variables to make this work. So we'll do dim principal as double. So this is going to contain the principal. Now there's a green squiggly line that says unused local variable. We're not worried about that right now. We will use it in a little bit. So then we need another variable, which we'll call the rate. So this will be our interest rate. And this will be an annual interest rate, which means we're going to have to convert this into a monthly interest rate. So let's just go ahead and create a variable for that, just to make things easier. We could do the calculation as we go, but in this case, doing a variable for this will be easier. So we're going to call it monthly rate as double. And then we need dim payment as double. The payment is going to store the actual monthly payment. So the first thing we need to do is actually bring in the values that were entered in the text boxes, and those are strings. So remember, we need to convert them into doubles or integers. So we'll do principal first. So we can use the try parse method for this. So we could do double.try parse. And remember, we pass the string first. So we do tb principal.text. And then the variable we want to store it in, we want to store it in principal. Okay. And then we can do it again, double.try parse. And we can do the interest rate, so tb rate.text. And then rate. And then for the last one, for converting the years, let's use our convert methods, since we talked a little bit about that. So we can do years equals, no, not TB years. I just want years. Do we not create a years? Whoops. Probably good to include the years variable if we're going to use that, right? So let's declare that years as integer. We're going to assume that we're dealing with whole years and not partial years. So we're going to have years. That's better. And then we do convert dot. Now, we talked about converting strings to doubles, or converting doubles to strings and to decimal. So how do we convert to integer? Well, if we start trying to type 2int, we see that we have 3 different types: 2int16, 2int32, and 2int64. And these mean the size of the integer. So we talk about 16-bit integer, a 32-bit integer, or a 64-bit integer. We're going to use the 32-bit integer here. Most systems now support 64-bit integers, but we'll just use int32 to be safe. We put some parentheses around it, and we need to put in the actual string. So this will be tb years.text. All right, that takes care of the conversions. Next thing we need to do is get our monthly rate. So let's just go ahead and do that computation. So we'll do monthly rate, and then we'll say it equals to rates. The way we do this is take the annual rate, divide by 12 for the number of months, and then we want to go ahead and convert it to a decimal. So we'll divide it by 100. There we go. All right. So now, how do we get the monthly payment? Well, you may have to do a little Google searching or just looking on the internet to find the actual formula, but I already have the formula, so I'm just going to go ahead and type out the code for you, and you're just going to have to trust me that this is the formula. If you don't believe me, you can look it up on the internet. So the payment is going to be, we take our principal, and then we're going to multiply it by some quantity. And the way this quantity works is we're going to take the monthly rate, and then we're going to divide it by another quantity. So what goes in the denominator is going to be 1 minus another quantity. And what goes in here is 1 plus monthly rate. And then right afterwards, we're going to raise that to some power. This is actually going to be negative number of actual payments. So it's going to be negative 12 times years. Okay, so that looks correct. I'm just double checking here. Principal monthly rate divided by 1 minus quantity of 1 plus monthly rate raised to negative 12 times years. Yep, this looks correct. All right, so we're good. Now the last thing we need to do is show this result. So we can do message box.show, and then we need to do payment. That should work. So let's go ahead and start this up. Okay, here's our form. So let's say our principal loan is $10,000. Our annual rate, let's say, is 4%. And notice I'm not putting the percent sign, I'm just doing the 4. And then the term in years, let's say we pay this back in 10 years. So I can click on calculate. And we see we get 101.24513816488. The good news is that is the correct number. So the formula did work. This would be the actual monthly payment. The bad news is this looks pretty poorly formatted, isn't it? It'd be nice if we had the dollar sign and we had 2 decimal places instead of all of that. Well, let's go ahead and exit this and see if we can fix that. And sure enough, we can. And this involves another method I don't think we've talked about yet. This is called the format method. And the idea with this is we can take a value and we can convert it to a string, but specify formats such as, I don't know, including dollar signs or specifying decimal places. So we're going to add some stuff to our code so that way our output looks a little bit nicer. So we're going to create another variable. I'll put it right here. Dim, I'm going to call it output as string. So we're going to display a string now instead of text. I mean, technically payment here does get converted to a string. And we're going, and this method returns a string, so we'll store that result in output. So we're going to set that equal to format, and then what we put in parentheses, or we'll put in 2 things. First is the actual variable that we want to do the formatting for. So that's going to be our payment variable, that expression, and then we can choose the style. So this has to be done as a string, so we put double quotes, and we want to say we start with a dollar sign, and then to handle numbers, well, we'll just use zeros. That's just how this method works. So we'll do a 0, and then we must have a decimal place, and then I'm going to put 2 more zeros to say there must be exactly 2 decimal places. Okay, so then all that's left is we need to change what we display now. We're going to display our output. So let's go ahead and start this up again. Let's use the same example as before. So we had 10,000, 4%, take 10 years to pay it back. So monthly payment is $101.25. This is correct, and the format of it looks pretty nice. Sure enough, that does work. So we'll click OK. And just to make sure the other stuff works, we'll click on Clear All. That clears everything here. Let's try another example. Let's say we bought a $25,000 car, and maybe that is at 3%. Let's do 3.5. And we're going to pay this back in 6 years. And the monthly payment for that is going to be $385.46. So sure enough, this does allow us to get our loan calculation. We'll click on exit just to make sure that works. Yep, that works. And there we go. That's our loan calculator.